So we are going to be in the book of James, chapter 4, verses 13 through 17. We took a 3-week break through the book of James for our Easter series. Had a fantastic first Easter as a church last week. And so this week we're back in the book of James. And so if you remember, James is the half-brother of Jesus. He's Jesus' little brother. He's writing this book to believers who have been dispersed or scattered because of persecution. And he's writing this to encourage them to live faithfully in the gospel truth, to live faithfully in the fact that Christ lived on their behalf and died and paid the penalty for their death and rose from the grave to overcome sin and death as we celebrated over the last 3 weeks, and that in him you have life, that it's not your work that saves you, but Christ has done every single bit of the work on your behalf so that you can be saved through faith alone, 100% by his grace alone. He has done everything. He does everything for you to be saved. He does everything for you to have life. He has done everything for you to live out the way that God has called you to live. And because he's done everything, you do nothing for God's favor. You do nothing for his approval. Christ got your approval for you, and you can live in the way that God has created you to live, in community with him for joy. It's the only way that it works, and James wants us to be faithful in that truth. He says this truth changes all that we do and all that we say, and we see this week that it also changes all that we plan to do and all that we plan to say. And you're here on a good week if you haven't been here before, because this will definitely be my shortest sermon ever. And so enjoy it. Some of you will probably still think this is long, but it's actually going to be the shortest one we've had so far. So enjoy, because we have a really big announcement at the end of the service, and we need to make time for that. So look at the book of James, chapter 4. We're going to read our text this morning right up front and jump in. So James 4, chapter 4, verse 13. It says, "Come now, you who say, today, tomorrow, we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin." Interesting text this morning. And I want to spend a little time kind of getting us into it so that we understand what James is really trying to say here this morning. Let's pray together and then we'll jump in. God, thank you so much for this text, and thank you for your word, and thank you that we can gather together and worship you, and thank you that you speak to us, and thank you that you're alive, and thank you that we can hear from you, and thank you that we can be changed by your grace. And God, I pray this morning that these words would come alive to us, and that we would begin to plan in a way that you desire us to plan, and live in a way that you desire us to live, and that we would receive all joy in giving you all glory. We love you and pray this in your name. Amen. Here's a question for you this morning. What do you want? What do you want out of life? What are your dreams? What's your purpose? Think to yourself for just a moment, why do I exist? And if you can kind of get that in your head, you may not even know, and if that's the case, you're in a great place. But maybe you can kind of think to yourself, what is my dream? What are my goals? Why do I exist? What is my purpose? And something pops into your head. And so then my question is this: what's the plan? How are you going to achieve that vision, that dream? How are you going to accomplish your purpose? What is the plan for you to get from here to there? All of us plan, right? Some of us plan a lot more detailed than others of us. Some of us plan very, very loosely. How many of you would say, I'm a planner? Like you walk into a calendar store, right? And I could just stop you right there, because if you walk into a calendar store, you're a planner, right? But you walk into the store and you're already asking for 2019 calendars, right? And you're upset when they don't have it, and you go home and you make your own. How many of you are just kind of like that? Right? And then how many of you are kind of like, I don't know, I'm really just trying to figure lunch out. Like I don't know where I'm going for lunch, right? Like that's some of us. And so, we'll pray for you, but beyond lunch, it's just a blur, and you're just kind of going through life. But all of us plan. We all plan. It's crazy how the most important things in our lives get plans, right? Marriages get plans, don't they? The guy plans to ask the girl out. He plans out the date. He plans out their relationship. He plans out the engagement. Hopefully, you're planning out the actual marriage, right? That typically gets left out, but we do a whole lot of planning up to the fact that we are going to get married. And then you also plan out your career, don't you? You start going to school at a very young age. A lot of us go off to college. A lot of us are planning our careers. We're laying out our career paths. We're figuring out how we're going to jump from one thing to another to get to the place we desire to get. We also plan out our retirement. Because what am I going to do with this marriage? And what am I going to do with this career? And what am I going to do with my life once all of my kids have grown up and gone and my career has come and passed? And I've got to figure out how I'm going to live in this life for joy when all of those things are done. We're planners. We all plan. And when we put our time and talent and treasure towards those plans, because those are the things that we desire in life, that we think are going to get us to our dream and the vision that we have for life and the purpose that we have that we feel like we need to accomplish. So we plan for those big moments. We spend our time there, our talents there, our treasures there, because we deem it worth it. We feel like that's what we need to get all that we desire to have. And this text is very interesting because James basically here is asking us a question that covers the entire field of philosophy. And we don't have time to dig down deep into that this morning, but the question he's really asking is, who are you? Who are you? What is your purpose? What is your life, he says. And I'll just say this morning, I feel like we are living in a world, maybe for the first time in human history, that has no idea what its purpose is. And honestly, we're not even seeking after purpose anymore, at least not in an ultimate sense. And it's a big problem in our culture. It's a big problem in our world. The answer today for what is life, who are you, what is life about, what deserves your greatest plan? The answer has been reduced to whatever you feel. Whatever your heart desires in this moment today. And so your greatest plans might be this today and that tomorrow, and it's constantly going to be changing because the ultimate goal is for you to dig down deep and decide who you want to be and what you desire to achieve and chase after that, plan for that, make that happen. And by and large, it ends with a whole culture of great depression and great anxiety and fear and confusion. Because when we live in that way, we find out at every turn, though we're being told everywhere, it's about you and it's about what you want and it's about your desires and it's about your feelings and you can do it and you can achieve it and just chase after those things. And then we find out at every turn, it's not about me. I don't control any of this stuff. How many of you are figuring that out in life? Man, I can't even control my next breath, let alone what happens this afternoon or 2019. I've got big plans for this afternoon. I'm going to take my kids to lunch. They're going to sit there. They're going to be good, and they're going to be quiet, and they're going to be loving, and they're going to be respectful, and they're not going to talk too loud or spill food all over the floor, and then I'm going to go home and get to take a nap while they let me nap. That's my plan. That's my longing. That's my desire. And I can tell you, I'm going to figure out real fast. I don't control them. I can try as hard as I want, but I'm out of control in this life. And even when it does seem like I can control something and accomplish something that I set out to do because I desired it, it never satisfies me the way that I think it will. All of that could happen this afternoon. I'm still going to wake up tomorrow morning and go, you know what? That wasn't enough. I need it to happen again today because nothing ever fully satisfies. So listen, the way that we live in the world today, the way that we pursue what our greatest visions and dreams and purpose and meaning is, and the way that we chase after that with all of our hearts, and the way that we plan to accomplish it, it's not working. It isn't working. Look around the world. It's not working. All of the things that we long for, love, peace, joy, happiness, those are not the defining things of our culture, but it's what every single one of us is chasing in our hearts. It's not working. And so James here this morning says something different, and we need to get it. And it's funny, I know this is a long introduction for a short sermon, but we need to understand this. And I've noticed something with my two little girls. I've got a 3 and a 5-year-old, and their birthdays are very close, just about a little over a week apart. And so for the last 3 years, we've tried to do something. I'm not sure if it's smart or not. It might be really dumb. But we tried to give them 2 different birthdays. Right? And the craziest thing happens because we'll set up for the birthday, we'll decorate for the birthday. One of them's into unicorns right now, one of them's into rainbows, so it's a whole lot of the same color and glitter, but in different shapes. And so one weekend it's unicorns, one weekend it's rainbows. And we set up, we get different gifts, we get different cakes, we invite everybody to our house twice and 2 different weekends in a row, and we bug everybody to death. And that's the way we do it. But inevitably, every single year for the last 3 years, the one whose party it is not that day will get real anxious about opening the other one's gifts. We'll get really anxious about blowing out the other one's candles. They really want to play with all of the other one's balloons. They want their name to be plugged into the happy birthday song. They get really upset about it and really anxious about it and really worried that their plans aren't happening, even though it's not their birthday. And so for the last 3 years now, we've had to sit our little girls down, Rachel and I, before the birthday. And we have to say to the one whose birthday it is not, and I say it in a very not the way I'm about to say it to you, but in a very loving, daddy way. It ends with hugs and kisses, and we go play, right? But basically what I have to say to them is, this is not your party. Like, I just want to tell you that right now. This day is not about you, right? You have been invited to another person's party in order to celebrate their life. It's about them, not you. And that's really hard for them to get. They nod their head, they say okay, they give me a hug and a kiss, they run and play, and everything is great until the party comes. And then they fail miserably at what they just said they understood. And this is what James says is so hard here about who you are. Because what he says is, this is not your party. You've been invited to the party of another to celebrate the life giver, to be excited about someone else's life more than your life, to give glory to the creator of the universe. Scripture says it's not your party, it's God's party. It's about him. You're here to glorify and worship him. And you've been invited to that party to find your greatest joy in the celebration of him. And that's hard because we all want to be the point. We all want our plans, not the plans of the one who's planning the party, whose life and party it's about. Even though, and this is great because this is what I've noticed about my little girls. It's unbelievable what my 3 and 5-year-old teach me about me and God. Because here's what I see. When my girls finally realize at some point during the party, when it all clicks, that it isn't their party and it's not about them, and they can celebrate the life of their sister, suddenly they start having a good time. It's unbelievable. They can rest, they can enjoy, even though their plans aren't being met. When they don't understand it, before they kind of get it and it all clicks, they're super anxious and worried, and there's lots of heartache and tears, and we're constantly having to take them into the room and explain to them over and over and over again, this is about your sister. Because they feel like glory is being stolen from them. They feel like their plans aren't being met. They can't rest. They can't enjoy. They don't have proper perspective. But when they realize that it's about the other, they start enjoying the other's plans. They start being full of love for one another, and the party gets a whole lot more fun, and it's full of a whole lot more laughter rather than anger and tears. And so James, in this passage, he says, hey, let me help you out this morning. Let me help you get through this life. All of creation, all of your plans, all of your purpose, all of your meaning, it's about God. It's about his plans and his purpose. And in his purpose, listen to this, you can find your purpose. And you can make plans towards something that's actually fulfilling, because like we talked about in the book of Ephesians, when you know who you are, you know what to do. And when you know what to do, you know how to plan. You know how to move forward. So look again at verse 13, because this is what James says. He says, come on now. Those who are following your own heart, those who are chasing after your own desires, those who feel like everything is about you. Those who live like you actually have some control. This is essentially how he starts verse 13. Come on, are you serious? And so James is giving a little bit of rebuke to the church. And then he poses this question. Do you really think that following your own heart is working? Or has it felt a little like trying to make someone else's party yours? Is that how life feels? Like constantly you're striving, and constantly you're pursuing, and constantly you're trying to achieve, and constantly you're chasing your heart's desires, and it just never feels like it's about you. Like it just never feels like you're in control. It never feels like you can accomplish what you need to accomplish. James says it's because it's not your party. It's God's. And so here's the question that he proposes. How's it working for you just to follow after your own heart? Is it just leading to a whole lot of heartache and heartbrokenness and confusion and depression and anxiety and worry? And ask yourself this question: how often do I look at time and locations and materials as though they're mine to plan? As though they're mine to plan for? As though they're mine to chase after? As though they're mine to control? And even as followers of Christ, we deal with this, don't we? This is a struggle for us. Because most of us have plans that don't include God at all. We often make plans like we don't live under anyone else's authority, like there's no one who created us, like no one can guide us who is greater than us and wiser than us. So we do the best we can, but most of our plans are godless. And I don't mean that you're kind of going against God in your plans, but what I do mean is when it comes to something like career, it's like, what pays the most? What community do I get to live in? What city do I get to belong to? What ladder can I climb in that career? And then maybe we go to God and say, God, what would you like? Because I kind of already have my mind made up. When it comes to where we will live, the first things that hit our minds are, what about my kids? What school are they going to go to? What are my neighbors going to be like? What kind of cars are going to be in the driveway? What kind of prestige does that give me? And it never hits our minds, does it? God, what neighbors do you want me to have? Where do you want me to be on mission? Because it's about comfort, and it's about family, and it's about my ideals, not God's. And it's even taught this way in the church a lot of times. We sprinkle some Jesus in the teaching, but it's really just good principles for how God will help you get your plan. That's what it's about. And suddenly, even in the church, we're making plans in the name of Jesus that have nothing to do with Jesus. It happens all the time. I'll catch myself doing it all the time. I'll pray over my kids at night before they go to bed, and I'll use the name of Jesus 100 times in the prayer, but I've caught myself praying, God, will you do this for us? God, will you do this for them? And it's all about my family and using God for what's most important, which is my family. Instead of, God, would you allow us as a family to worship you, to glorify you, to care about you, to put you as most glorious, come what may. Let our family be about your glory because it's all about you. That's a struggle for us. It's a real struggle for us. We can't pray, God, your kingdom come. It's very difficult. God, your kingdom come in my marriage. God, your kingdom come in my parenting. God, your kingdom come in my workplace. God, your kingdom come in my neighborhood. That's hard. We just don't naturally have the thought in our planning, do we? That it's not all mine, that I don't deserve anything, that every good and perfect gift comes from God and God alone. It's not a common thought in our planning that I don't control time, and I don't control places, and I don't control materials like James is talking about in these verses. And to act like we are in control of these things and chase after them like we do, can I just say, it's empty. The writer of Ecclesiastes says, all of it is vanity. Chase after it with all that you are and achieve all that you could possibly achieve. And you find that none of it was worth it and none of it satisfied and none of it was actually the point. He says it's a wasted life. And so in verse 14, James asks the question to reflect on. Here it is, the philosophical question. What's life? What is your life? Why are you here? What is your purpose? What is the dream? What will satisfy you? And then come to the conclusion that, man, my way and the world's way, it's not working. The more that I make it all about me, the more that we make us and our thought process that I can control time and places and things, the less it actually satisfies me. So what is it all about? James poses this really deep question. What is your life? What is the good life? What do you want? If you had it, you think you would be satisfied. What is that thing? And then this morning, come to the realization that maybe we have bought into the lie that life and satisfaction are found in the time required for us to live a good and long, happy life. Or the places that we live, or the places that we visit, or the things that we build, or the families that we make, or the career ladders that we climb, or the friendships that we pour into, or the reputations that we work on, or the money that we make to buy the things that we think we want and desire and need. And the greatest plans are the ones that we feel like will deliver in these areas of life. Is that where we are? And just get your head out of church for a minute, get your head out of Sunday school answer for a minute, and really allow yourself to investigate your heart, because this is what James 1, he's writing to the church. Where's your heart? What is your life? What are you pursuing? What is greatest? Because that is what you'll plan for. Is your plan going to accomplish satisfaction? Is it going to bring you joy? And James is not saying that any of those things are bad, but what he is saying is they're not the point. They're fleeting. They're better things. Don't settle for creation. Why worship the gift and why worship the outcome rather than the creator of them? And then I love this because he gives us a little bit of perspective on our lives and everything in them that we chase after. And this is what he says. And this is heartbreaking for us who are just chasing after everything we think we want today. He says, life is like a mist. It appears for a moment and then it vanishes. It's gone. I remember the first time that my 5-year-old Piper saw her breath in the cold weather. We were walking out to our car, and she was a little bit behind me, and all of a sudden I just hear giggling, right? And so I turn around, like, what's going on? She's just back there giggling, and I see her just going, right? And she's like, look, look. It was the first time. I was like, I've never seen it either. And so she's just like, what is this? And she, right? And then all of a sudden she's like, just trying to see it as much as you can. And then suddenly, as I'm explaining to her that that's your really stinky breath hitting the cold air, right? That's what that is. It's your hot breath hitting the cold air, and it's making a mist. And then she started getting really aggravated because she was like, why won't it stay? And she was just getting like hyperventilating as much as she was trying to like blow, just. And here was the thing, no matter how hard she worked, no matter how fast she breathed out, no matter how much she wanted it to stay, no matter how much she willed the mist to stay, the breath disappeared like that. She couldn't do it on her own. She couldn't extend its life. There was nothing she could do to make herself see the mist longer than it would last, and it was but a moment. And James says, in the grand scheme of eternity, that is what your life is like. And we don't have time to really dive into it this morning, but we need an eternal perspective on God. We won't ever get what James is saying in the book of James without an eternal perspective on God. We will not understand God's plans for our lives without an eternal perspective on God. So listen to me. Just take this in and think about it later. God's law only makes sense with an eternal view. Grace only makes sense with an eternal view. The promises of God only make sense with an eternal view. The mission of God only makes sense with an eternal view. Stewardship only makes sense with an eternal view. Sacrifice only makes sense with an eternal view. Holiness only makes sense with an eternal view. Having eternal perspective changes the way that you see everything in the now and allows you to live in grace. It allows you to understand His mercy. It allows you to live in His plan. One of the biggest problems that we have with God is that we put Him inside our midst and think He can only work here. And if it isn't going the way I think it should go, then in my midst, then He's wrong. And anger will ensue. And frustration will ensue, and anxiety will ensue because He's putting up unicorns rather than rainbows. It's dangerous to live in the now alone. It's natural to just make our lives an inward focus when we only live in the now. Have an eternal perspective. Why would we, in our limited knowledge and our limited time, with our limited abilities, with our inability to even know what will happen next in the next moment, let alone this afternoon, base our lives and plans on the mist? Why would you not rest in the one who's in control? Have you read Genesis 1:1 lately? That in the beginning, it correlates perfectly with what James says here. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth and all that were in them. God controls time. God controls places. God controls matter. He's in control of all things. He controls it all, and He has a greater plan than we do. Ours is a mist, and His is eternal. Why would we demand that the party be about us? Why would we not rest in the one who's making the plans and whose plans are eternal and whose plans are sure and whose plans are already going out the way that He declared they would? And why don't we rest in His lordship? And so verse 15, James says, instead of doing your own thing, we ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or do that. Now, what he's not saying here is that every time we say something, we need to say, if God wills it, or if the Lord wills, or God willing. Have you known those guys? Don't do it, right? Don't be weird like that. You don't have to say that after everything. It's okay sometimes. But you don't have to say it all the time. So this is not a cliche thing that we just say. This is a conviction that we live in. Because the real question here, James wants us to ask ourselves is, what plan are you basing your life on? Is it God's who is eternal, or is it yours which is a mist? And I need to say, it's all or nothing. We cannot, Christian, listen to me in this room, we cannot compartmentalize our plans. We cannot separate the spiritual from the rest of all that we do. We have a major tendency in Christianity to do this. Sundays are for God, Mondays are for work, Monday nights are for families, Friday nights are for friends. And I will live under those ways of living, under those categories of life, under those ways of pursuing what I desire on those days and those nights, and the spiritual things I will leave to God. That's not what James is talking about. You're only fooling yourself, and you're only robbing yourself of the joy that God has created you to have in community with Him when that's what you do. So James says, let who we are in Christ affect everything. Let that affect your family and your workplace and your bank account and your free time. It affects how we plan in all of those things and in all of those areas. We think God first, and then we plan. So here's what James is really asking. Does your relationship with God or with Jesus have nothing to do with who you are and what you plan? A lot of us are there. Some of us are in the category that Jesus sort of affects everything that I do and everything that I plan. And I don't want you to lie to me or to yourself this morning and say, God is number one, when He's clearly not. It's only robbing you. And what generally happens is if God is not one, He's generally 4, 5, or 6. Because if you do make Him 2 or 3, He's going to convict number 1 and 2. And so generally speaking in our lives, when God is not first, He's way down the list, so far down that He's not convicting what is really number 1 for me. And so a lot of believers are family first, career first, friends first, all sorts of things. And then Jesus kind of gets squeezed in somewhere down the line. He does make the top 10. But it's compartmentalized. And it's robbing you. Or he says, does Jesus determine everything? Because we know that we can trust Him. We know that life is about Him. We know that He controls it all. And that in Him we can have life and we can know what life is all about because He is the one that controls everything and He loves us and cares for us and wants what's best for us. And we can have confidence in Him that when we seek His will and His plan, it's just like seeking our joy. Because that's what life was created to be about, glorifying Him. You are invited to the party to celebrate Him, glorify Him, worship Him. That's where your joy is. That's where your meaning is. That's where your purpose is. That's what your dream is, whether you know it or not. That's what you should be chasing. So listen to me this morning. There you go. That's what you were created for. Now you know. Live for that and pursue joy. Live for that and make plans as though it's the greatest thing. Live for that and pour all of your time, talents, and treasures into the fact that God controls everything. That He's sovereign and He loves you and He wants what's best for you. And you can still plan. But if it doesn't work out, guess what happens? It doesn't crush you. It's just a change to the plan. Because no matter what happens in your plans, it doesn't change the one who's in control. It doesn't change your purpose, and it doesn't affect the joy you get from living in that purpose. So look at verse 17 as we close. Now that we know, he says, whatever we know is right, and we know that it's the right thing to do, and we fail to do it, that is sin. So listen to me. It's life taking from you, not life giving to you, not to live as though God is in control. Not to live as though He is the one to most be worshiped and glorified. Not to live as though he is the one that showers over everything you do and everything that you say and everything that you plan. If you leave here and you put anything above him and his plan and his will and his glory, it's only going to take life from you, even in your pursuit of life. There's no life in death, and God tells us that he is life, and in him is life, and in nothing else is life. So only chase him, and if you know and you don't and you fail to do so, it's only stealing life from you. And it's going to steal life from everyone around you that doesn't know their life is a mist. And they're chasing all sorts of other things, and they don't know the truth, and they don't know their purpose, and they don't know their meaning, and they're searching for it within themselves, and they're lost, and life is being stolen from them. Live in this reality. Listen, looking at the plans of God compared to your plans is like standing in front of the ocean while standing in a little puddle and going, wow, look at this puddle. I love this puddle. I will die for this puddle. I'll write poems about this puddle. I'll write books about this puddle. I'll paint pictures of this puddle. Every single one of us will look at ourselves and scream, look at the ocean. Like, why are you doing this? Look at the ocean. And that's what James is doing for us this morning. He says, look at God. Look at God. That's where your salvation is. That's where your life is. That's where your plan is. That's where fulfillment is. Every desired outcome that you have, it's in him. Look to him. Plan in him.